Today we're doing section 1.7, and section 1.7 concerns multiplying and dividing with signed numbers. So today we're going to multiply and divide numbers, decimals, fractions, and then also talk about some variable terms. When talking about our sign rules, you have to remember if they have the same sign, you're going to multiply or divide as indicated, but the same sign means you'll have a positive result. If you have different signs when you multiply, that means the result is going to be negative. Our next set of rules deal with what happens if you have more than two numbers. So if you're multiplying and you have an even number of negatives, 2 negatives, 4 negatives, 6 negatives, an even number of negatives is a positive result. An odd number of negatives, which would be 3 negatives, 1 negative, 5 negatives, 111 negatives, an odd number of negatives has a negative result. Our last group of rules deal with the zero rule. If you multiply a number by 0, you get a 0 as a result. If you take 0 and you divide it by any number, the result is 0. However, if you divide any number by 0, the result is undefined. In other words, you can't have 0 in the bottom. So here are our problems we're going to work today. Your directions say simplify, and our first one says 4 times negative 5. They have different signs. Different signs tell me my result is negative. So this would be a negative 20. Our next problem is negative 6 times negative 7. They have the same sign. When I multiply 6 times 7, I get 42. Same sign tells me that answer will be positive. Looking at my next one, I have 2 negatives. 2 negatives make a positive result. So 3 times negative 5 times negative 10 would give me a positive result. 3 times 5 gives me 15, and 15 times 10 would give me 150. If you wanted to deal with them using the signs, you could say 3 times negative 5 is a negative 15, and then you would have a negative 10, and 2 negatives would make a positive 150. Our next problem is a little out of place, but you have 42 times 0. I know that anything times 0 is just 0. Our next group of problems are long strings of numbers which are being multiplied. So I have negative 1 times negative 3 times 2 times negative 1 times 5. At this point, you can choose to deal with the numbers first. Let me say that again. At this point, you can choose to deal with the negatives and positives first or deal with them last. It doesn't matter. If I deal with them first, I see 1, 2, 3 negative signs. 3 negative signs, that would be odd, and an odd number of negatives is negative. So all I have to do now is multiply my numbers across. So 1 times 3 would be 3. 3 times 2 would be 6. 6 times 1 would be 6. And 6 times 5 would be 30. So my result is a negative 30. If you didn't like working it that way, another way that you could work it was by grouping them. I can group my first two. Negative 1 times negative 3 would give me a positive 3. My next group would be negative 2 if I multiplied those out, and 5. 3 times negative 2 would give me a negative 6. I ran out of room, sorry. Negative 6 times 5 would give me a negative 30. My last one on this screen is negative 2 times 3 times negative 1 times 4. 2 negatives are going to make a positive, so I know my result will be positive. 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24, and this will be a positive 24. In our next slide, we have division, but we also have more multiplication, and this time we'll be multiplying with decimals. Your sign rules still hold though. In my first one, I have negative 36 divided by negative 9. They have the same sign, so my result will be positive, and it would be a positive 4 because 36 divided by 9 is 4. My next problem is negative 7 times 8. We have different signs, so my result is negative, and 7 times 8 is 56, so my answer is negative 56. The next two problems deal with multiplying decimals. My sign rules still hold, so I have a negative 3.4 times 6. Those have different signs, and different signs tell me that my result will be negative. Multiplying this one out, the way that you multiply decimals is you put the one with the most digits on the top. So the 6 would go on the bottom and the 3.4 on the top, and then we can multiply them. So 4 times 6 would give me 24, carry the 2, and 6 times 3 would give me 18 plus 2, which would give me 20. My answer is not 204. Remember, what you do with your decimal is you see how many places you had in your factor, and that's how many you mark off in your answer. So this answer, remember, is negative, and it'll be a negative 20.4. Looking at our next one, we have a negative 0.3 times a negative 0.7. I know that two negatives are going to make a positive result. I have a 0.3 and a 0.7, and I'm going to multiply them. I already took care of my signs, so I'm going to leave signs out of it at this point. 3 times 7 is 21. If I notice though, I had one decimal place in the first factor and one decimal place in the second factor, which will give me two decimal places in my answer. So my answer would be a positive 0.21. If you left off the 0, that's fine. The other two on the page are a little easier. We have 64 divided by a negative 8. They have different signs. Different signs tell me my answer is negative. This would be a negative 8. 35 divided by negative 5. They have different signs, so my answer is negative. 35 divided by 5 would give me 7, so my answer is negative 7. Moving to our zero rules, you have two problems at the top, 5 divided by 0 and 0 divided by 4. One answer is 0 and one answer is undefined. Here's how I keep them straight. I know that in this first problem, 0 is in the bottom. It is underneath. So even though the word is not undefined, I think of 0 being in the bottom. If it's underneath, it's undefined. And that's how I separate the two. If it's 0 in the bottom, that means you cannot divide by 0, and that's an undefined answer. But if 0 is in the top, your answer is just 0. Skipping one, looking at your next problem, 0 divided by negative 6, 0 is in the top. If 0 is in the top, your answer is 0. The rest of the problems are all division. My first problem is negative 21 divided by negative 7. Two negatives make a positive, and this would be a positive 3. We're also going to divide decimals here, but I promise the decimals that I give you to divide here will be really easy, and the denominator will go into the numerator easily. Looking at signs, I have 32.4 divided by a negative 4. They have different signs, so my answer is negative. 4 goes into 32 8 times. There's my decimal point. And 4 goes into 4 one time. My last problem is negative 20.8 divided by 2. They have different signs, so my answer is negative. 20 divided by 2 would give me 10. Point. 8 divided by 2 would give me 4. And that's what I would get. This concludes the first part of section 1.7.